We still don't have a definitive answer to what might be the single most important question in One Piece. What does the D actually mean in the D clan? But rest assured, we're closer now to learning the truth than we've ever been. Between the God Valley flashback revealing Rox's true identity as Davy D Zebeck, Vegapunk's broadcast attempting to tell the D clan something crucial before being cut off, and the revelations about Imu's personal vendetta against the Davy bloodline, Oda is finally pulling back the curtain on one of the longest running mysteries in the series. The D has been there since chapter 1, right in Luffy's name, as well as Gol D Roger, who opened the series by declaring the One Piece exists before getting executed. The mystery has been haunting us from the very first page. The world government is terrified of the D. They renamed the Pirate King from Gol D Roger to Gold Roger just to hide that initial. In chapter 576, during a meeting between Roger and Whitebeard, he had told him about the nickname that the government had given him. Roger didn't like to be referred to as Gold Roger because it was not his true name. They also tried to scrub Rox D Zebeck from history so thoroughly that most young marines today have never even heard of him. When Luffy awakened Gear 5 at Wano, the 5 elders immediately ordered his wanted poster to remove the D from his name. They'd left it alone through 6 previous bounty posters, but the second that he became Nika, they panicked. The world government failed here as Big News Morgans published the real poster with the correct name anyway, but the attempt shows just how desperate they are. This level of desperation is very telling. The D is more than just a name. It's a letter that threatens the very existence of the world government and the lies that they have been building over the last 800 years. In Merijo, the celestial dragon children are told a terrifying bedtime story. If you misbehave, the D will come and eat you. The elders warn of a storm that those bearing the D will inevitably bring. These false gods who claim divine authority are haunted by this letter that has persisted for 8 centuries despite their best efforts to erase the D clan. At Marineford, after Ace died and Whitebeard made his legendary speech about the will of D, the 5 elders specifically noted the D in Ace's name. With his name being so prominent during the war, it was more dangerous to them than any other consequence of Marineford. They considered it to be more dangerous than the prison break of Impel Down, and more dangerous than all of the marine casualties, as well as the death of a Yonko. The D getting widespread attention was their biggest fear. This is because every time someone asks what does the D mean, it leads them closer to the poneglyphs, the Void Century, as well as the truth that they've spent 800 years trying to bury. So let's go back to where all of this started, 800-900 years ago during the Void Century. This was a period when a massive war shaped the world forever. On one side, you had an alliance of 20 kingdoms that would eventually form the world government, whose rulers would become the celestial dragons. These are the false gods who claim divine authority over the world. On the other side, you had the Great Kingdom and its allies. They were fighting for something that terrified the 20 kings so much that they felt compelled to erase it from history. Then we have Imu, the secret immortal ruler who has been hiding behind the empty throne for 8 centuries. Imu had confirmed all of this directly to King Cobra before murdering him, that the D was originally a label used by the enemies of the first 20. It was a mark of resistance and defiance. Having the letter D in your name is an open declaration that you stand against what the world government represents. Unfortunately, the D clan was on the losing side of the ancient war that occurred during the Void Century. They were the opposition. They represented everything that the future world government feared: the preservation of knowledge, the pursuit of freedom, and the absolute refusal to bow down to false authority. 2 names stand out from the ancient Void Century era as the earliest confirmed D carriers in history. These are Nefertari D Lili and Davy D Jones. Both of them earned Imu's personal eternal hatred, and for good reason. Nefertari D Lili, or in other words, the Traitor Queen. Queen Lili is one of the most fascinating figures in the history of One Piece. She was one of the 20 founding monarchs of the world government. She should have moved to Merijo with the others and become a celestial dragon and lived in luxury for the rest of her days alongside her fellow conquerors. Instead, she committed what might be the most greatest act of historical sabotage ever. Lili was the only one out of the 20 monarchs who refused to move to Merijo. She insisted on returning to Arabasta, and then she vanished during that journey. For 800 years, the world government and even her own descendants believed that she had simply disappeared mysteriously. But Cobra learned the truth from the letter Lili left behind. It was passed down through generations hands of Nefertari kings. Lili deliberately scattered the indestructible pornoglyphs across the entire world. The pornoglyphs and the knowledge that they contain was supposed to have been destroyed. All knowledge of the era that they come from should have been forgotten. The 20 kings won the war and they had total control. They could have rewritten history however they wanted, but Lili made sure that the truth would survive, written in indestructible stone scattered to every corner of the planet where the world government couldn't find and control them all. She left a letter for her descendants, commanding them to protect these historical markers. The Nefertari family has been following her will for 800 years, guarding Pluton's location beneath Arabasta without even fully understanding why. This act of preservation earned her Imu's eternal fury. When Cobra asked Imu about the fate of Queen Lili, they murdered him personally. So we can deduce that this is because Lili's betrayal still infuriates Imu 800 years later. This now leaves Vivi as the last surviving member of the Nefertari line. She's being hunted by Imu personally because of what her ancestor did centuries ago. The will of D doesn't die with the person, it passes down through bloodlines, waiting for the right moment to manifest again. Then we have Davy Jones, a legendary figure that had spawned myths that survived nearly a millennium. I'm sure all of us know of the phrase Davy Jones' locker. The saying goes that everything that falls to the sea floor belongs to Davy Jones. The Davy Back fight, that absurd pirate game that we saw on Long Ring Longland, it was named after him. His legend is so embedded within pirate culture that it survived 800 years of the world government trying to erase it. Rox D Zebeck claimed that Davy Jones was the king of the world before Imu. Imu vehemently denied this and got legitimately angry about it, but the reaction tells you something critical. You don't get that defensive about someone who was never a threat. We don't know whether if Davy Jones literally ruled the world or not, but he was clearly a massive enemy to Imu and the 20 kings. Davy Jones made some kind of promise, a vow that his will would be carried down through generations and would eventually comfort Imu, and it would be fulfilled by his descendants. The world government has been hunting the Davy bloodline for 800 years because of this promise. They massacred everyone that they could find on God Valley 38 years ago. They killed Rox and assumed that they killed his wife and child too, not knowing that Marshall D. Teach carries that bloodline. Whatever promise Davy Jones made, Imu is still terrified that it'll be fulfilled. During the God Valley incident, when Rox confronted Imu directly, he asked which one that they fear more, Davy Jones or Joy Boy. Imu responds enraged, stating neither will ever return. This reveals that these two figures were equally threatening to Imu, and it suggests that Davy Jones and Joy Boy potentially could have worked together 800 years ago, or they were rivals who allied against the 20 kings. The initial D itself likely originated as Davy abbreviated over time. Whether if it stands for Davy or Dawn or both, the function is clear. It marks those who carry an inherited mission to challenge the false gods and to usher in a new era of freedom. For hundreds of years following the Void Century, the world at large forgot the significance of D. Even those who inherited the initial often didn't know of its true meaning. Imu stated this directly. Present-day carriers of the initial usually don't know about its origins and meaning. The will of D continued secretly. It was passed down through families whose ancestors bore it, but the significance of the initial lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to manifest. Now here's something absolutely critical. Not all Ds are from one bloodline or even one race. The D appears in multiple unrelated families that have been scattered across the world. The Monkey family, the Gol family, the Trafalgar family, the Nefertari royal family, and even a Giant's family. As Jaguar D Soul mentioned that everybody in his clan carries the D initial. This suggests that the D clan is more of a spiritual lineage than strictly a genetic one. It's a group of people connected by a shared heritage of ideals and destiny rather than kinship. Members of different D families have even had children together, Gol D Roger and Portgas D Rouge for example, further mixing the bloodlines. Throughout history, D carriers often found themselves at odds with authority, even when they didn't understand why. The world nobles developed a deep fear of the D initial becoming known to the wider public. Remember the frightening bedtime story that the celestial dragons tell their children about the D that will come and eat them. The upper levels of the world government remembered that the D are their natural enemies and monitored them quietly. But here's what's interesting, they didn't outright exterminate all bearers of the D initial, at least not openly in most cases. Monkey D. Garp, born 78 years ago in the Goa Kingdom, was allowed to to rise high in the Marines despite his name. Other Ds lived relatively normal lives too, but some persecution did occur in the shadows. The Ohara scholar Cloudy Clover had a brother who also bore the D initial, but that brother was killed, presumably targeted for bearing the name. Clover got scared after his brother's death and hid his own middle initial to survive, lying about it when he was questioned. This shows that even educated D carriers didn't always embrace their heritage when they understood how dangerous that it was. Over the generations, knowledge of the will of D survived in fragments and whispers. Don Quixote Rocinante told young Law that around the world the D is secretly inherited, and in a certain land the D clan were called the natural enemy of God. This suggests some cultures kept the old stories alive, but most D carriers themselves grew up completely ignorant of it. Jaguar D Soul, currently 127 years old and the oldest living D carrier, didn't know what the D meant when Nico Robin had asked him about it. Luffy and Ace as children never even thought about their strange middle initial, aside from Sabo pointing out the coincidence that they both have it. It's also worth noting that not every blood relative of a D carrier has the initial themselves. Trafalgar Lami, Law's younger sister, is the only known named blood relative to a D carrier who is not a confirmed D carrier herself. This suggests that the initial passes down through certain family lines, but not universally to all relatives. The will lived on through 8 centuries, passed from parent to child, and the D clan are waiting for the moment when enough D carriers would emerge at the same time to bring the storm that the celestial dragons fear. The first huge resurgence of the will of D in the modern era came through a man that the world government tried to erase from history. This of course is Rox D Zebeck, his real name being Davy D Zebeck. He was a direct descendant of Davy Jones, and Rox was aware of this fact. Rox changed his name to hide his connection to the Davy bloodline because the world government had been hunting his family for centuries. Rox was the captain of what became known as the strongest pirate crew ever assembled. This consisted of Edward Newgate, Charlotte Linlin, Kaido, Shiki, Captain John, and more, all under a single flag. 3 of these pirates would go on to become emperors, another would become Roger's greatest rival, and they all sailed under Rox's command. Here's what makes Rox truly terrifying from the government's perspective. He was aware of Emu, he knew about the promise Davy Jones made. He actually sought to conquer the world and become its king, following in his ancestors' footsteps. 48 years ago, Rox made such an audacious move that it was mind-boggling. He raided Mary Jo itself during a reverie, and this is what he accomplished during that infiltration. He killed a Marine admiral, making him a top priority target. He took 5 kings hostage. He broke into Emu's personal chamber, the Room of Flowers, and directly confronted them. He's the only person ever confirmed to have invaded that room. He mocked Emu right to their face and survived the encounter. He founded his crew by ransacking the celestial dragon's heavenly tribute, and he destroyed one of the gates of justice. Rox did all of the things that the world government feared a D-bearer would do, but unlike Roger, who was somewhat politically neutral, Rox specifically wanted to overthrow the celestial dragon's rule and become king of the world himself. He was openly trying to fulfill his ancestors' promise. The Rox pirates would go on to dominate the seas for years. They were unstoppable, but the world government had a horrific plan that would lure Rox out and give them a chance to eliminate him and his bloodline once and for all. 38 years ago, everything came to a head at an island called God Valley. This incident is so central to understanding the will of D that we need to go through this in detail. The world government discovered that survivors of the Davy family, Rox's relatives, were all hiding on God Valley. In response, the celestial dragons organized something grotesque. They called it a native hunting competition. It was literally a state-sponsored massacre where world nobles would literally hunt and kill civilians for sport, and the Davy family members were marked as high-value targets. Vigilant Garling, the commander of the God Knights, led this operation. About 200 world nobles participated in it. They categorized their victims by point value. About 100,000 regular civilians were called rabbits, 150 rare targets, and 13 super rare rabbits. These were people considered extremely dangerous to the world noble system. This included several Davy family members and a young Bartholomew Kuma. The grand prize for winning this massacre was Shakuyaku, the former captain of the Kuja pirates who had been kidnapped from Hachinozu specifically for this event. Rox learned what was happening and launched an attack to stop it. His wife Eris and infant son Marshall D. Teach were on that island with the Davy family. This was personal for Rox. But here's where it gets complicated. 3 powerful D carriers converged on God Valley that day, each with different agendas. Rox D. Zebeck came to stop the massacre and save his family, of course. Gol D. Roger and his crew came primarily to rescue Shakuyaku, who Roger's crew had been trying to recruit for years. They also wanted the treasure that was up for grabs. Monkey D. Garp came initially to protect the Celestial Dragons, as he was a Marine Vice Admiral, but mainly because he heard that his rival Roger was there and his competitive pride wouldn't let Roger have all of the action. The battle that unfolded was catastrophic. Pirates attacked from all directions. The Rox pirates stormed in from the southeast. The Roger pirates came from the northwest. Marines tried to maintain order as world nobles fled in terror, and then Emu shockingly personally intervened during the incident. They had secretly possessed J. Garcia's Saturn, using Saturn as a vessel on the battlefield. When Rox, Roger and Garp all felt Emu's overwhelming presence, something unprecedented happened. These 3 natural rivals who had been fighting each other for years temporarily allied against the common threat. Rox, Roger, Garp, Whitebeard, Big Mom and Kaido all unleashed simultaneous Supreme King Haki-infused attacks on Emu. These were 6 of the era's most powerful fighters striking at once. The combined assault obliterated Emu's body, but Emu simply regenerated, demonstrating their immortality. Then Emu retaliated by transforming Rox D. Zebeck into a demon. Rox went on a rampage completely out of control, attacking his own crew under Emu's curse. He believed he'd killed his wife and son, though Kuma teleported them to safety. Emu ordered the demonized Rox to kill everyone remaining on the island so that there were no witnesses. Roger and Garp realized that they had to stop Rox, as Rox used the voice of all things to communicate with them, begging them to kill him. He was conscious enough to know what was happening but couldn't stop his own body. The battle was intense. Every attack that they landed, Rox regenerated from, using his own Supreme King Haki defensively to counter theirs. It was a battle of attrition, and Roger and Garp were losing. Roger revealed their only option, which was to channel all of their Supreme King Haki mass into one final overwhelming attack. Using Kagutsuchi's ace and infinitum explosion together, Roger and Garp landed a devastating combined strike which had finally broken through Rox's defenses. The sheer amount of Supreme King Haki incapacitated Rox and freed him from his demonic transformation. In those final moments, Rox regained himself. He begged Roger and Garp to escape, telling them that they couldn't die there. But then the God Knights arrived, led by Garling. Rox knew what was coming. His internal thoughts thanked Roger and Garp for stopping him, freeing him from that curse which prevented him from killing his family. Unfortunately, Garling then delivered the final blow, ending Rox's life while he was already defeated and freed from Emu's control. The official records say Garp and Roger defeated Rox, which is technically true, but it omits both the demonic transformation and Garling's execution. Following the death of Rox, the Rox pirates immediately disbanded. His crew didn't really have that much loyalty to each other. They'd only stayed together for Rox's strength and the treasure. Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido and Shiki all went their separate ways, eventually becoming legendary pirates in their own right. The island of God Valley itself mysteriously vanished. It was sunk into the ocean and erased from all maps. The world government classified everything about the incident as S-level top secret, the highest classification. In addition to this, they erased Rox from history. Garp was branded Hero of the Marines for his role, though he took no pride in it, since he despised the Celestial Dragons that he'd supposedly been protecting. The government conveniently left out that he'd worked with Roger, that Emu had been there, and that Rox had been transformed into a demon. Now, the world government did fail in one crucial way. Rox had a son. Marshall D. Teach escaped God Valley as an infant thanks to Kuma's teleportation. The Davy bloodline survived, and the will was inherited, and now Blackbeard sits as an emperor carrying on his father's ambition to rule the world. The God Valley incident highlights the world government's greatest fear and greatest failure. They can kill D carriers and erase them from history, but they cannot kill the will of D itself. This now brings us to the Pirate King, the one who reached the end and learned everything and then ignited the Great Pirate Era following his death. Roger was born bearing the D initial, but for most of his life he didn't know what it meant. Just like most D carriers, he was a legendary pirate who gradually became the most notorious figure on the sea. 28 100 years ago, Roger was diagnosed with an incurable disease. Knowing his time was limited, he decided to pitch one last journey with his crew. It was a final voyage to reach the end of the Grand Line. Roger somehow figured out that Lodesta Island, the final island the log post points to, wasn't actually the end. The real final island was beyond that point, and the road poneglyphs gave clues about its location. His crew began locating these road poneglyphs, translating them with Kozuki Oden's help. 25 to 24 years ago, Roger and the Roger pirates reached Laughtale, the true final island. There they found Joy Boy's hidden treasure and learned the complete truth about the history of the world, including the Void Century, the Great Kingdom, and crucially the meaning of the D. The crew reacted with laughter, hence why the island was called Laughtale. Whatever they learned was both astonishing and perhaps bittersweet. Roger decided to nickname the treasure the One Piece, and he finally understood why the world government wanted to hide his true name. Gol D Roger became the only known D-bearer within the modern era to discover the meaning of the Will of D. He knows about what promise was made 800 years ago, what role the D clan is destined to fulfill. Then he kept most of what he learned a secret. Roger did tell Whitebeard during their final meeting, and the conversation went something like Roger offering to reveal where the One Piece is, and Whitebeard, in the most Whitebeard response possible, says he wasn't interested in the treasure. But Roger did tell him about the D, and whatever he said impacted Whitebeard deeply enough that years later, dying at Marineford, Whitebeard made that legendary speech about inherited will and the coming storm. Roger also tried to tell Oden some of it, but circumstances prevented him from giving the full explanation to him. After reaching Laughtale, Roger disbanded his crew not too long after, knowing that he was dying, but he had one more play. He turned himself into the Marines and arranged to be executed publicly in his hometown of Logtown. 24 years ago, at the age of 53, Gol D Roger was executed, and he died smiling. It's that iconic D-clan smile that we've seen time and time again. Smiling at death is perhaps the most defining trait of D-carriers. It's happened 8 documented times in the series now. Roger smiled at his execution. Luffy smiled in Logtown when Buggy was about to behead him. Sol smiled and laughed while being frozen by Kuzan. Rouge smiled while naming newborn Ace even as it killed her. Ace died with a smile, thanking everyone for loving him. Law smirked and taunted Doflamingo when he thought that he was about to die. Garp was seen laughing when Kuzan stabbed him with an ice blade, and Rox expressed gratitude in his final moments before Garling killed him. Roger smiled, and his final words ignited the Great Pirate era. He declared that his treasure was out there, daring the world to seek it. This was Roger passing on his will to the next generation. The world government attempted to suppress Roger's D initial by renaming him Gold Roger in all of their propaganda. For over 20 years, most people didn't know the Pirate King was a D carrier. Only those close to him knew the truth, but they couldn't suppress what Roger started. His execution didn't end the Will of D, it actually spread it across the entire world. What's fascinating is how Roger's will got divided among different people. Shanks received the Straw Hat and eventually gave it to Luffy, passing on the physical symbol. Whitebeard received the knowledge about D and took on the mission to protect Ace. Rayleigh and the crew carried the memories and the truth about Laughtale. Ace received the bloodline from Roger but rejected the gold name, taking his mother's surname instead. Luffy received the essence, which is the pure spirit of adventure, the complete freedom, and the drive to reach the end. Roger seemed to know someone like this would eventually come along. He said they're waiting for our captain, implying someone would appear who'd complete what he started. Roger knew that his death wouldn't end his will. Whitebeard confirmed this at Marineford. Someone will inherit Roger's will. Even if you kill the person, their will lives on. Speaking of Roger's bloodline, we need to now discuss what might be the most superhuman feat of willpower in the series. This was Portgas D Rouge holding her unborn child in her womb for 20 months. Normal human pregnancy lasts 9 months, Rouge doubled that plus 2 more months, sustaining her baby through sheer willpower and determination alone. This was because the world government was hunting every woman who'd been close to Roger, checking pregnancy dates, looking for any child who could be his heir. They were going to kill Roger's baby the moment that they found it. Rouge knew if Ace was born at the expected time, which was 9 months after Roger's death, then he'd be discovered and executed immediately. So she just didn't give birth. She kept him safe inside her, waiting until the government's investigation moved on. This is clearly a D trait, the refusal to submit to fate, the determination to protect inherited will even at the cost of your own life. When Ace was finally born 22 years ago, a full year and 3 months after Roger's execution, Rouge was dying from the strain. She held him and named him Gol D Ace and died smiling. The smile was her acceptance of death, knowing that her will had been fulfilled. Ace never knew her, but he honored her sacrifice completely. He took her surname Portgas instead of Gol, refusing to acknowledge Roger as his father. He hated Roger for being absent, even though Roger had died before he was born. Ace knew this intellectually, but he couldn't get past his emotional resentment. Ace declared Whitebeard as his true father instead. But here's the tragedy: Ace spent his entire life trying to justify his own existence. He was haunted by a single question: was it right for me to have been born? He thought that he was a mistake, a cursed child who shouldn't exist because of whose son he was. The world had decided Roger's bloodline didn't deserve to exist, it was cursed, and sadly Ace internalized all of this judgment. Nonetheless, Ace was still a bearer of the D initial. He smiled at his death when Arkainu's fist burst through his chest. When he knew that he was dying, Ace's final expression was a smile of gratitude as he thanked everyone for loving him despite being Roger's son. He never ran away from battle. Dadan noticed Ace had inherited Roger's personality. When asked why he didn't run from Blue Jam, his response mirrored what Roger would have done. He protected his crew with absolute devotion. Ace chased Blackbeard in order to avenge Thatch. He died protecting Luffy. He punched anyone who insulted Roger. Ace claimed to hate his father, but whenever someone badmouthed Roger's worthless son, Ace retaliated with violence, because those insults were really about him, and he was defending himself even if he didn't consciously realize it. 2 years ago, at the age of 20 at Marineford, Ace died, but his death triggered a new era. Luffy broke through hell, came back stronger, Sabo returned with Ace's Mera Mera no Mi and inherited his will, and even in death, Ace's will was passed forward, just like every other D carrier before him. This now brings us to Marshall D. Teach, the son of Rox. Blackbeard might be the most controversial D carrier in One Piece because he seems to contradict everything that the initial should represent. He's cowardly as he showed complete terror when Whitebeard was about to kill him at Marineford. He begged for mercy in the most un-D-like display possible. He's a murderer who killed his crewmate Thatch in order to steal the Yami Yami no Mi. He's a schemer who hides in shadows rather than facing challenges head on. He captured Ace and handed him over to the Marines, directly causing the Summit War. He killed Whitebeard, his own captain, someone who'd protected him for decades. He has no honor, loyalty, or traditional heroic qualities, but yet he's got the D. He's Rox's son, and he explicitly stated that he wants to rule the world just like his father tried to. Now, Teach embodies the selfish version of inherited will. Most D carriers fight for others, for freedom, truth, and for protecting their friends. Teach fights for himself. He's not trying to bring the dawn of a new world. He wants to rule the night. He doesn't care about dismantling the world government. He just wants to replace it with himself as king. He even wants the world government to officially recognize his kingdom on Hachinozu, which is bizarre for someone from the Davy bloodline. It's like he wants the government's validation while simultaneously trying to overthrow them. And again, you have to constantly remember he's still a bearer of the D initial, and it does manifest in his personality in specific ways. Teach believes in fate and dreams. Remember his speech at Mocktown, "A man's dream will never die." That was pure D philosophy. So he understands the inherited will, he just doesn't care about using it for noble purposes. Teach is also shrewd in ways other D carriers aren't. Luffy charges forward on instinct. Law overthinks but acts on emotion. Roger made decisions based on what sounded fun. Teach actually plans, on the other hand. He spent decades waiting for the Yami Yami no Mi. He manipulated his way into the warlords to reach Impel Down. He timed his strike against Whitebeard perfectly. He's inherited his father's ambition to become king of the world, as Rox wanted that title and he believed that it rightfully belonged to the Davy bloodline, since Davy Jones had been king before Emu. Teach is following that same path. He has also named his flagship the Saber of Zebeck, openly honoring his father even though most of the world doesn't know who Rox is. Teach is proof that the D isn't inherently good or evil. It's a mark of those who will shake the world and challenge the existing order. Whether if they do that heroically or villainously, it doesn't change their fundamental nature as agents of change. The Monkey family gives us the clearest picture of how the will of D inheritance works across generations, and it's fascinating how different three blood relatives can be while still embodying the core spirit of D. Monkey D. Garp is the rebellious marine. He is the most complicated D carrier carrier in One Piece. Born 78 years ago in the Goa Kingdom, he joined the Marines 56 years ago at age 22 alongside Suru and Sengoku. He is now a Vice Admiral, technically serving the organization that protects the Celestial Dragons, but Garp has been giving the world government's authority the middle finger his entire career. They offered him Admiral rank multiple times. He refused every single promotion because he didn't want to be a direct subordinate of the elitists in Merijo. At God Valley, he called the Celestial Dragons maggots and vermin, not caring who heard. He became physically ill watching the native hunting competition, vomiting at the carnage. He saved Roger's son from execution, raising Ace as his own grandson despite knowing that it was treasonous. He taught both Luffy and Ace to be strong, even knowing that they'd both become pirates in the end. His Fist of Love punches hurt Luffy despite his rubber body because according to Oda, Garp's attacks actually carry love, not just haki. When Kuzan, his own beloved student, stabbed him with an ice blade on Hachinozu, Garp laughed. "Kuzan, you brat," he said, even while freezing. Even betrayed by someone that he trained, Garp exhibited that D smile, accepting his fate with a laugh. Garp's entire career is this impossible balancing act. He believes in justice and protecting civilians, so he stays as a Marine, but he will not bow to the Celestial Dragon's authority. That refusal is the line that he won't cross, and it's pure D resistance. Monkey D. Dragon is Garp's son, born 55 years ago when Garp was just 23, and Dragon took his father's resistance to the logical extreme. Dragon was once a Marine himself, and he was present at God Valley as a young cadet, part of the forces sent to round up civilians using tranquilizer rounds. The government told them that it was a training exercise, with Dragon following orders initially, but then he witnessed the native hunting competition firsthand. He saw Celestial Dragons hunt children for sport. He witnessed Shepherd Summers chase a young boy up a tree, place thorns beneath it, and laugh gleefully as both the boy and his father fell onto spikes and were impaled. He saw the world nobles treat human lives as collectible trophies. Dragon became physically ill. He wanted to act but knew defying a world noble meant his entire platoon would be slaughtered in retaliation, so he tried to stay silent and follow orders. But then he saw a world noble preparing to shoot a young Kuma who was listening to Ivankov give a hopeful speech to other slaves. Dragon snapped. He couldn't stand by anymore. He tranquilized the world noble, immediately panicking at what he'd done. At that moment, that choice to save Kuma despite the consequences planted the seeds for everything that came after. Dragon would eventually form the Freedom Fighters, which evolved into the Revolutionary Army, where Garp works within the system while defying its masters. Dragon declared open war on them. The Revolutionary Army exists for a single purpose: to overthrow the Celestial Dragons and dismantle the world government entirely. Dragon carries the D's opposition to False God, but he's not waiting for destiny to unfold through inherited will. He's actively trying to speed it up by building a global revolutionary movement. He's the world's worst criminal, specifically because he threatens the government's existence more directly than any pirate ever could. And then there's Luffy, the convergence of everything that the Will of D represents. He's inherited Roger's straw hat. He carries the symbol of the Pirate King's will. He's got his grandfather's strength and his father's idealism, and he awakened the Nika fruit, making him the warrior of liberation, the very figure that Joy Boy embodied 800 years ago. He's friends with Vivi, the last Nefertari. He's close with Shirahoshi, who is Poseidon. He punched a Celestial Dragon in the face at Shabodi with zero regard for consequences. He fought the 5 elders head on at Egghead. But here's what makes Luffy special. He isn't trying to inherit anyone's will. He doesn't know what the D means, and he doesn't care about the Void Century or Emu or any of it really. When Robin asked him about the Will of D back in Arabasta, he was completely clueless about it. Luffy just sees someone suffering and he can't walk away from it. He sees corrupt authority and has to punch it. That pure, uncomplicated drive for freedom is what makes him the perfect vessel for inherited will. He's not burdened by the weight of history, so he can act with complete authenticity. He's fulfilling all those ancient prophecies without trying to, and without even knowing about them. He's the entire point of inherited will. It doesn't require conscious effort. The dream gets passed down naturally through those who embody its spirit. The Monkey family's 3 generations, Garp rebelling from within the system, Dragon rebelling by trying to destroy the system, Luffy rebelling by just being himself and helping his friends. Luffy is accidentally fulfilling 8 centuries worth of prophecy in the process. All 3 are enemies of false authority, and all 3 value freedom above all else. And you can guarantee that the 3 of them would smile in the face of death because they know their will lives on. Moving Moving on to Law, who is another very unique D carrier. Most Ds either don't know and don't care, or they know but keep it a secret, but Law wants to understand the D initial. He learned about the D from Don Quixote Rocinante, who told him about the natural enemy of God, and the storm that D carriers bring. The knowledge has driven Law's actions ever since. He understands he's part of something bigger, even if he doesn't know exactly what. Law is also one of the few Ds who uses the initial strategically. For years, he kept his full name hidden, going by Trafalgar Law publicly, but then during the Dressrosa arc, he revealed it, Trafalgar D Water Law, specifically because he knew that it would impact how people viewed him, particularly Doflamingo. What makes Law's story compelling is how he inherited will from someone who wasn't a D. This is Rocinante, a former celestial dragon who died trying to save him. Corazon gave Law the mission to disrupt Doflamingo's plans and help bring about whatever storm the D clan is destined to cause. Law carries that inherited will while also bearing the D naturally. He's a bridge between those who actively understand the D significance and those who just live the will of D instinctively. When Doflamingo had Law at his mercy, pointing a gun at his head, Law exhibited the classic D trait. He smirked, mocking Doflamingo, and flipped him off with no fear of the consequences. He told Dofi that D will surely bring forth another storm, a prophecy that's proving true as we continue with the series. Corazon wasn't a D, but he passed his will to Law, and Law as a D carries both his own inherited mission and Corazon's sacrifice forward. But the D initial isn't just limited to pirates and revolutionaries. As we've talked about earlier in the video, the Nefertari family also carries the will of D. At the Reverie, when Cobra figured out some of the truth and he wanted to ask Emu about Queen Lily's disappearance, this was a fatal mistake. Emu personally murdered Cobra and framed Sabo for it. Before he died, Cobra used his last moments to try protecting Sabo, to tell him about Lily's letter and to pass on what he'd learned. Even in death, the Nefertari bloodline continued their mission to preserve the truth. Vivi, who is currently 18 years old and the youngest known D carrier, is the only surviving member of the Nefertari family. She sailed with the Straw Hats and became an honorary crew member, even though she stayed behind to rule her kingdom. Vivi embodies the same idealism and determination as Luffy. Vivi doesn't know that she's a D. She doesn't know about Lily's betrayal, and she doesn't know why Emu wants her specifically. We now turn our attention towards the Ohara incident, which occurred 22 years ago, and 2 D carriers were deeply involved with it. Claudie Clover was the director of Ohara's library, one of the greatest scholars in the world. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, Clover had a brother who bore the D initial, and the brother was killed, and it's been presumed it was because he bore the D initial. Clover hid his own middle initial, lying about it when he was questioned. When a Cypherpol agent put a gun to his head during the Buster call, Clover initially showed fear, tried to negotiate as he tried to avoid being killed, and this does make Clover a bit of an exception amongst the D carriers. Unlike most, he did show fear of death, perhaps because he lacked the fighting power to resist. In his final moments, surrounded by burning books and the destruction of Ohara, Clover composed himself. He tried to tell the world what he'd learned about the Void Century, to reveal the name of the ancient kingdom. The government silenced him, however, before he could finish, but his final stand was symbolic of a D carrier. He was facing impossible odds to try preserving truth, accepting death with tears but also with dignity. Clover's research survived, as the books that he threw into the lake were recovered by Sol and the Giants. Taken to Elbaf, Vegapunk read those books and continued Clover's work. That's inherited will in action. Jaguar D Sol was a Vice Admiral Giant, currently 127 years old and the oldest living D carrier. Sol mentioned that everybody in his giant clan carries the D, making his family one of the few entire bloodlines bearing the initial. When Sol learned what the government was planning at Ohara, the genocide to hide historical research, he defected from the Marines. He helped Robin's mother Olivia escape, tried to save Ohara scholars, and he ultimately protected young Robin at the cost of his own freedom. When Kuzan froze Sol for his betrayal, Sol was laughing, that distinctive giant's laugh, which echoed across the frozen landscape as he told Robin to live and to never stop seeking truth, to carry on the mission. That pure D smile in the face of death, accepting his fate because he knew his will would continue through Robin. When Robin asked Sol what the D meant, he admitted that he didn't know. Sol survived being frozen from Kuzan. He's been living in Elbaf this whole time, preserving Ohara's books, teaching history at the Walrus School, waiting. Sol even personally confronted the God Knights on Elbaf recently, showing that at 127 years old, he's still fighting to protect knowledge and oppose the government. Now here's what's wild about where we are in the One Piece story. story, there are more active D carriers right now than possibly any other time since the Void Century, and they're all converging towards the same point. Monkey D. Luffy is an emperor acknowledged as Nika's second coming. He's racing towards Laugh Tale. He's fought the Five Elders head on. He's close friends with Vivi and Shirahoshi. He's got Roger's hat and Joy Boy's power. Marshall D. Teach is an emperor actively hunting for the One Piece and the ancient weapons, possibly carrying out his father's will, as he's named his flagship after his father and he wants to become king of the world. Law is a supernova, a former ally to Luffy, explicitly interested in uncovering the Will of D's meaning. He's seeking to understand what he's a part of. Dragon leads the revolutionary army, building towards a final war against the Celestial Dragons. He's declaring war on the government openly. Garp, who was recently frozen by Kuzan, has trained the next generation of Marines and inspired countless others. His influence persists even in his defeat. Vivi is being hunted by Imu personally, marked as someone significant despite not knowing about her D heritage yet. The fact that she is specifically targeted suggests that she'll play a crucial role in the future. And then Sol survived Ohara and is in Elbaf, where Luffy's crew is currently at. At 127 years old, he's still fighting, teaching, and preserving knowledge. The narrative is deliberately bringing these inheritors of will together for what seems like a final confrontation. And on the other side, you've got Imu, the figure who's been hiding for 800 years, manipulating history, trying to suppress the Will of D, and finally being forced to act openly. Imu and the Gorosei are terrified. With the Five Elders trying to stop Luffy's awakening, they physically travel to Egghead to cut off Vegapunk's broadcast right before he could reveal something about the D clan. They're scrambling to maintain control as everything they feared is come to pass. We can deduce that the storm that Celestial Dragon children were warned about is the multiple D carriers who are active simultaneously, all pushing towards the same goal from different angles. The God Valley incident was a preview of what happens when D carriers converge. Back then we only had 3 D carriers, but now we've got 7 active carriers, all moving towards a collision with Imu and the world government. A recent frustrating moment within One Piece was Vegapunk's broadcast that got cut off right before he revealed something critical about the D clan. During his post-death message to the world about the Void Century, Vegapunk said to the members of the clan of D, "Among you there is a," and then the transponder snail was destroyed. We were right there. He was about to tell the entire world something about the D clan, something significant enough that the government desperately wanted it silenced. Was he going to say, "Among you there is a chosen one," or "Among you there is another, a savior, a destiny, a traitor"? We have no idea how he was going to end that sentence. But what we do know is the rest of Vegapunk's message. He confirmed the world is sinking due to the ancient weapons being used. He revealed there was a war that shaped history. The fact that something about the D clan was a part of that message tells us that it's connected to everything. The Void Century, the ancient weapons, the sinking of the world, Joy Boy's mission, all of it. This interrupted revelation suggests that we're close to the full truth. Vegapunk knew what the D meant. He'd read Ohara's books and he'd researched the Void Century extensively, and he was going to tell everyone. The government can try their best to delay the revelation, but they can't stop it forever. The truth about the D clan is going to come out, whether if it's through Luffy reaching Laugh Tale, through surviving pieces of Vegapunk's research, or through another means that we have yet to see. This now brings us to Joy Boy and his connection to the D clan. Joy Boy was the first person to possess the Nika fruit 800 years ago. He was the warrior of liberation who fought in the ancient war. He made a promise to the mermaid princess Poseidon that he couldn't fulfill in his lifetime, and he left a message in Laugh Tale apologizing for his failure. He commanded Zunisha centuries ago to walk eternally as punishment for some unspecified crime. When Imu was asked who he fears more, Davy Jones or Joy Boy, Imu states neither will ever return. Some have deduced that Joy Boy and Davy Jones worked together 800 years ago, or they were rivals who allied against the 20 Kings. When Zunisha heard Luffy's awakened heartbeat at Wano, it said Joy Boy had returned. The drums of liberation, Luffy's Gear 5 heartbeat, matched exactly what Zunisha remembered from 800 years ago. Luffy inherited Joy Boy's power through the Nika fruit, and possibly his will through the Will of D. Was Joy Boy himself a D carrier, as we don't know his full name yet? If it was something like Joy D Boy, or if he carried the initial some other way, it would explain the connection perfectly. Or maybe Joy Boy and the D clan were allied but separate. Kaido told Luffy during their fight, "You couldn't be Joy Boy either, it seems." But he was wrong. Luffy is Joy Boy, Joy, or rather he's the one who inherited Joy Boy's will and power after 800 years. The connection between Joy Boy and the D clan is the missing link that we need to understand the full picture. When Luffy reaches Laugh Hill and learns what Roger learned, we will finally know how these pieces fit together. While Oda hasn't totally spelled it out for us, we can theorize what the D represents. First and foremost, it's about inherited will. It's a core theme of One Piece. You can kill the person, but you can't kill their dreams. There are three major theories about what D literally stands for. Theory 1 suggests that the D stands for Dawn. Pedro told Luffy that he would bring the dawn. Kozuki Toki's prophecy spoke of waiting for the dawn of the world. The entire Wano arc built towards an opening of the country's borders for that dawn. Luffy was born on Dawn Island. If this is true, then the will of D is literally the will of Dawn, the inherited mission to bring a new morning after 800 years of darkness under the world government's rule. The second theory suggests that D stands for Davy. The recent chapters of One Piece have helped to push this narrative. Rox explicitly identified himself as Davy D. Zebeck, a direct descendant of Davy Jones. If D stands for Davy, then everyone bearing that initial is carrying on Davy Jones' will to oppose Imu and fulfill his promise. This would explain why Imu is so terrified of the D initial. It's not just an abstract concept, it's a literal continuation of Imu's greatest enemy's will, passed down through his bloodline and allied friends and families. The third theory suggests that the D initial stands for both Davy and Dawn. So the will of Davy could very well be the will of Dawn. Davy Jones might have been fighting to bring a new dawn to the world 800 years ago. His will, the will to liberate the world from 20 Kings' tyranny, became known as the Will of Dawn. Joy Boy and Davy Jones, you could theorize, fought together for the dawn of a new era. They ended up losing, but they passed their will down through the D clan, and that will has persisted through 8 centuries of darkness. So D carriers are all inheriting that same dual mission: fulfill Davy's promise and bring the dawn of a new era. The will of D is the through line connecting everything for the final saga of One Piece. Every major player in the final war either bears the D or is fighting against those who do. Imu is afraid because they know how all of this ends. The dawn that the D clan has been carrying for centuries is finally breaking over the horizon. And Whitebeard said it best at Marineford: when someone finds that treasure, the whole world will be turned upside down, and that day will mark the end of the world government's reign. Someone will carry on these wills, and when that day comes, the world government will face a colossal battle that will engulf the entire world. It is inevitable, for the will of D is eternal. So there you have it. This is everything that I have on the will of D and the D clan. If there is anything that I've forgotten to mention, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I cannot wait to see you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.